Hi everyone, and welcome back to Where the Red Fern Grows Read Aloud. Today I'm going to be reading Chapter 2 of Where the Red Fern Grows, but before I jump into it, I just want to do a brief recap of what Chapter 1 was from yesterday. So Chapter 1, the author saw a group of dogs in a fight. He noticed that one of the dogs that was severely injured was a hound. That hound ended up bringing him memories to his childhood days. I'm going to read the last paragraph of Chapter 1, and then I'm going to jump into Chapter 2. Remember that our purpose for reading is for enjoyment, okay, because of the genre. All right, so here's the read of the last paragraph in Chapter 1. As I caressed the smooth surfaces, my mind drifted back through the years, back to my boyhood days. How wonderful the memories were. Piece by piece, the story unfolded. That was the last paragraph in Chapter 1, so now we're going to jump into Chapter 2. He had a flashback to his boyhood days. I suppose there's a time in practically every young boy's life when he is affected by that wonderful disease of puppy love. I don't mean the kind a boy has for a pretty little girl who lives down the road. I mean the real kind, the kind that has 4 small feet and wiggles and a wiggly tail, and sharp little teeth that can gnaw on a boy's finger. The kind a boy can romp and play with, even eat and sleep with. I was 10 years old when I first became infected with this terrible disease. I'm sure no boy in the world had it worse than I did. It's not easy for a young boy to want a dog and not be able to have one. It starts gnawing on his heart and gets all mixed up in his dreams. It gets worse and worse until finally it becomes almost unbearable. If my dog wanting had been that of an ordinary boy, I'm sure my mother and father would have gotten me a puppy. But my wants were different. I didn't just want one dog. I want 2, and not just any kind of dog. It had to be a special kind and a special breed. I had to have some dogs. I went to my father, had a talk with him. He scratched his head and thought it over. Well, Billy, he said, I heard that old man Hatfield's collie is going to have pups. I'm sure I can get you one of them. He may as well have poured cold water on me. Papa, I said, I don't want an old collie dog. I want hounds, coon hounds, and I want 2 of them. I could tell by the look on his face that he wanted to help me, but couldn't. He said, Billy, those kinds of dogs cost money, and that's something we don't have right now. Maybe someday when we can afford it, you can have them, but not right now. I didn't give up. After my talk with Papa, I went to Mama. I fared no better there. Right off, she said I was too young to be hunting with hounds. Besides, a hunter needed a gun, and that was one thing I couldn't have. Not until I was 21 anyways. I couldn't understand it. There I was sitting in the middle of the finest hunting country in the world, and I didn't even have a dog. Our home was in the beautiful valley far back in the rugged Ozarks. The country was new and sparsely settled. The land we lived on was Cherokee land allotted to my mother because of the Cherokee blood that flowed in her veins. It laid in the strip of the foothills of the mountains and the banks of the Illinois River in northeastern Oklahoma. The land was rich, black, and fertile. Papa said it could grow hair on a crosscut saw. He was the first man to stick the cold steel point of a turning plow into the virgin soil. Mama had picked a spot for our logged house. It nestled at the edge of the foothills in the mouth of the small canyon and was surrounded by the groove of a huge red oaks. Behind our house, one could see miles and miles of the mighty Ozarks. In the spring, the aromatic scent of wildflowers, red buds, pawpaws, and dogwoods drifted in the wind's currents, spread over the valley and around the house. Below our fields, twisted and winding, ran the clear blue water of the Illinois River. The banks were cold and shady. The rich bottom land near the river was studded with tall saguaros, birches, and box elders. To a 10-year-old boy, this was the most beautiful place in the whole wide world, and I took advantage of it all. I roamed the hills, the river bottoms. I knew every trail in the thick cane brakes and every animal track that was pressed in the mud along the banks. The one that fascinated me the most were the baby-like tracks of a river coon. I'd lie for hours examining them. Before leaving, I'd take a switch and sweep them all away. These I called my trail looks. The next day I'd hurry back, and sure enough, 9 out of 10 times there in the clean sweep ground I would find in the tracks the ringtail coon. I knew he had passed over the trails during the night. I could close my eyes and almost see him humped up and waddled along, fishing under the banks with his delicate paws for crawfish, frogs, and minnows. I was a hunter from the time I could walk. I caught lizards on the trail fence, rats in the corn crib, and frogs in the little creek that ran through the fields. I was a young Daniel Boone. As the day passed, the dog-wanting disease grew worse. I began to see dogs in my sleep. I went to my father and mother. It was the same old story. Good hounds cost money, and they just didn't have it. My dog wanting became so bad I began to lose weight, and food didn't taste good to me anymore. Mama noticed this, and she had a talk with Pa. "You're going to have to do something," she said. "I've never seen a boy grieve like this. It's not right, not at all." "I know," Papa said, "and I feel just as badly as you do. But what can I do? You know, we don't have that kind of money." "I don't care," she said. "You got to do something. I can't stand to see him cry like that. Besides, he's getting to be a problem. I can't do my work. I can't get my work done. He follows me around all day long, begging for hounds." "I offered to get him a dog," said Papa, "but he doesn't want just any kind of dog. He wants hounds, and those cost money. Do you know what the Parkers paid for those 2 hounds they bought? $75. If I had that much money, I'd buy another mule. I sure do need one." I overheard this conversation from another room. At first, it made me feel pretty good. At least I was getting to be a problem. Then I didn't feel so good. I knew my mother and father were poor and they didn't have any money. I began to feel sorry for them and myself. After thinking it over, I figured out a way to help. Even though it was a great sacrifice, I told Pa I had decided I didn't want 2 hounds. 1 would be enough. I saw the hurt in his eyes. It made me feel like someone was squeezing water out of my heart. Pa set me on his lap and we had a good talk. He told me how hard times were and that it looked like a man couldn't get a fair price for anything he raised. Some of the farmers had quit farming and were cutting railroad ties so they could feed their families. If things didn't get better, that's what he would have to do. He said he'd give anything if he could to get some good hounds for me, but there didn't seem to be any way he could right then. I went off to bed with my heart all torn up in little pieces. I cried myself to sleep. The next day, Paul had to go to the store. Late that evening, I saw him coming back. As fast as I could, I ran to meet him, expecting a sack of candy. Instead, he handed me 3 small steel traps. If Santa Claus himself had come down out of the mountains, reindeer and all, I would have been more pleased. I jumped up and down and cried a whole bucket full of tears. I hugged him and told him what a wonderful papa he was. He showed me how to set them by smashing the spring down with my foot and how to work the trigger. I took them to bed with me that night. The next morning, I started trapping around the barn. The first thing I caught was Sammy, our house cat. If that didn't cause a commotion. I didn't intend to catch him. I was trying to catch a rat, but somehow he came nosing around and got in my trap. My sister started bawling and yelling for Mama. She came running, wanting to know what in the world was going on. None of us had to tell her. Sammy told her he was spitting and squealing. He was mad. He couldn't understand what the thing was that was biting his foot. He was making an awful fuss about it. His tail was as big as a wet corn cob, and every hair on his small body was sticking straight up. He spit and yelled and dared anyone to get close to him. My sister yelled her full heads off at the time, saying, "Poor Sammy, poor Sammy." Mama shushed them up and told me to get the fork stick under the clothesline. I ran and got it. Mama was the best helper a boy could have. She put the fork in over Sammy's neck and pinned him to the ground. It was bad enough for the trap that was biting his foot, but to have his neck pinned down that way was too much. He threw a fit. I never heard such a racket in my whole life. It wasn't long until everything on the place was all spooked up. The chickens started crackling and flew up on the hillside. Daisy, our milk cow, all but torn and barn up. Daisy, our milk cow, all but torn the barn lot up and refused to give any milk that night. Sloppy Ann, our hog, started running in circles, squealing and grunting. Sammy wiggled and twisted. He yelled and spit, but it didn't do him any good. Mama was good and stout. He held him down tight to the ground. I ran in and put my foot on the trap spring, smashed it down, and released with his foot. With a loud squall, he scooted under the barn. After it was all over, Mama said, "I don't think you'll have any more trouble with that cat. I think he learned his lesson." How wrong Mama was. Sammy was one of those noisy kind of cats. He would lie up on the red oak limb and watch every move I made. I found some slick little trails out in the garden down under the tall hollyhocks. Thinking they were game trails and not knowing they were Sammy's favorite hunting trails, I set my trap. Sammy couldn't understand what I was doing out there, messing around his hunting territory. He went to investigate. It wasn't long until I had him limping with all 4 feet. Every time Papa saw Sammy lying around in the sun with his feet wrapped up in the turnip rags, he would laugh with big tears until big tears rolled down his cheeks. Mama had another talk with Pa. She said she was going to have to say something to me because if I caught that cat one more time, it would drive her out of her mind. Papa told me to be a little more careful where I set my traps. "Papa," I said, "I don't want to catch Sammy, but he's the craziest cat I've ever seen. He sees everything I do and just has to go sniffle around." Papa looked over at Sammy. He was lying on all sprawls in the sunshine with all 4 paws bangled and sticking straight up. His long tail was swishing this way and that. "You see, Papa," I said, "he's watching me right now and just waiting for me to set my traps." Papa walked off to the barn. I heard him laughing, fit to kill. It finally got too tough for Sammy. He left home. Oh, he came once in a while, all long and lean look. He was never the same friendly cat anymore. He was nervous and wouldn't let anyone pet him. He would gobble down his milk and then scoot off for the timber. Once I decided to make friends with him because I felt bad for catching him in my traps. I reached my hand out to rub him. He swelled up like he was sitting like a sitting hen. His eyeballs got all green and he growled way deep down. He spat at me and drew his back paw like he was going to knock my head off. I decided I'd better leave him alone. In no time at all, I cleaned out the rats. Then something bad happened. I caught one of Mama's prize hens. I got one of those young man peach trees switching over that. Papa told me to go down to the crane breaks back of our fields and trap. This opened up all kinds of wonders. I caught possums, skunks, rabbits, and squirrels. Papa showed me how to skin my game. In neat little rows, I tacked the hinds of the smokehouse wall. I stand for hours and admire my magnificent trophies. There was only one thing wrong. I didn't have a big coon skin to add to my collection. I couldn't trap old Mr. Ringtail. He was too smart for me. He'd steal the bait from my trap springs. He'd steal the bait from my traps, springs the trigger, and sometimes even turn them over. Once I found a small stick standing straight in one of my traps. I showed it to Papa. He laughed and said the stick must have fallen from the tree. It made no difference what Papa said. I was firmly convinced that the smart old hoon had deliberately poked the stick in my trap. The traps helped my dog wanting considerably, but like a new toy, the newest wore off, and I was right back where I started from. Only this time, it was worse, much worse. I had been exposed to the feel of wildlife. I started pestering Mama again. She said, "Oh no, not that again. I thought you'd be satisfied with the traps. No, Billy, I don't want to hear any more about hounds." I knew Mama meant what she said. This broke my heart. I decided I'd leave home. I sneak out a quart jar of peaches, some cold cornbread, and a few onions, and started up the hollow back of the house. I had it all figured out. I'd go away off for some big town and get 100 dogs and bring them all back with me. I made it all right until I heard a timber wolf howl. This stopped my home leaving. When the hunting season opened that fall, something happened that was almost more than I could stand. I was lying in bed one night trying to figure out a way I could get some dogs when I heard a deep baying of a coonhound. I got up, opened my window. It came again. The deep voice rang loud and clear in the frosty night. Now and then I could hear a hunter whooping to him. The hound hunted all night. He quit when the rooster started crowing at daybreak. The hunter and the hound weren't the only ones awake at night. I stayed up and listened to them until the last tone of the hound's voice died away in the daylight hour. That morning I was determined to have some hounds. I went to Mama again. This time I tried bribing. I told her if she'd get me a hunting dog, I'd save the money I earned from my furs and buy her a new dress and a box full of pretty hats. That time I saw tears in her eyes. It made me feel all empty inside, and I cried a little too. By the time she was through kissing me and talking to me, I was sure I didn't need any dogs at all. I couldn't stand to see my mama cry. The next night I heard the hounds again. I tried to cover my head with the pillow and shut out the sound. It was no use. The voices seemed to bore its way through the pillow and ring in my ears. I had to get up and again go to the window. I'm sure if the coon hunter had known that he was slowly killing a 10-year-old boy, he would have put a muzzle on the hound. Sleep was out of the question. Even on nights when I couldn't hear the hound, I couldn't sleep. I was afraid if I did, he would come and I would miss hearing him. By the time hunting season was over, I was a nervous wreck. My eyes were red and bloodshot. I had lost weight and was thin as a beanpole. Mama checked me over. She looked at my tongue and turned back one of my eyelids. "If I'd known any better," she said, "I swear you weren't sleeping at all. Are you?" "Why, Mama?" I said. "I go to bed, don't I?" What does a boy go to bed if he isn't to sleep?" By the little wrinkles that bunched up on her forehead, I could tell Mama wasn't satisfied. Papa came in during one of those inspections. Mama told him she was worried about my health. "Aw," he said, "there's nothing wrong with him. It's just because he has been cooped up all winter. A boy needs sunshine and exercise. He's almost 11 now. And I'm going to let him help me in the fields this summer. That will put some muscle on his back." I thought this was wonderful. I'd finally grown to be a man. I was going to help Papa in the farm. And that is the end of chapter 2. All right, so a recap of chapter 2. We have our conflict. Conflict is also known as a problem. That is that Billy wants those 2 hounds, but unfortunately his family can't afford it to him. So inside it's eating Billy up. And now that hunting season has came and he's heard those hoons, it's really starting to bother Billy. So we have Billy, Mama, and Papa as the main characters. We have the conflict, which is Billy can't have the 2 hounds. And we also have the setting, which is in the Ozark Mountains of Oklahoma on the Cherokee land. So tomorrow, tune in for chapter 3 of Where the Fern Grows, and we'll see how Billy is working with his father. Again, any questions or you like a copy of the book, please let me know. I have a couple. See you tomorrow.